Hey everyone, I'm Bhavin, the CEO of Magoosh, and I'm here with Pete Rossman. So Pete is a GMAT expert at Magoosh, and yesterday he took the GMAT at home. That's right, the GMAT's offered at home because of COVID-19. GMAT exams have been canceled, and so he's one of the early folks to take the GMAT at home, and he's going to share a bit about his experience. Yeah, so Pete, how just tell us about how it went overall. How are you feeling now that you're done?
I'm feeling good. I think it went well given the adjustments that had to be made on the fly. But overall, the experience did go a little smoother than I expected it to, so that was nice.
Okay, and let's start with just walk us through the check-in process.
In a room by yourself, have to be in a room by yourself. Can't have anyone else in the room with you. You're allowed to check in up to 30 minutes before the test. So mine was at 6. So at 5:30, I was able to start the check-in process. So what they do is you start the check-in, you download some software, they check your internet speed, your microphone and a webcam, both of which you need to take the test. If your internet speed is not over, I think 1 megasecond, I don't think they'll allow you to take the test either. And this room is kind of far away from our router. So if you want to get really in depth technically, I wasn't able to use the 5 gigahertz band, but the 2.4 gigahertz band worked just fine.
Okay, and what site did they use to check your internet speed?
It was in app in the software, so I wasn't able to see.
Okay. Well, one recommendation I would have, and we'll drop a link to this in the video below, is if you go to speedtest.net, folks can check your internet speed at home. And it sounds like the minimum requirement is 1 megasecond. So that way you'll know ahead of time if you'll have an internet connection where you can take the GMAT at home.
Yep. I also want to add, you can download the software to take the online GMAT ahead of time. They won't actually let you take it, but you can go through the check-in process yourself, just get a taste of what it's like.
Okay. And you mentioned you had to have a webcam. So would a webcam on your computer work for folks who don't have an external one?
I imagine it would. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. I forget what the technical specs are for the webcam, but it wasn't like 200 megapixels or something like that.
Okay. And then in terms of proctoring, did someone talk to you? Could you see their face?
That raises an interesting point. So when they do the test for your webcam, they're going to take a picture of your ID. They have you take a picture of all of your surroundings, so the front, 2 sides, and back of the room, just to make sure that there's no paper within reach. And then you see yourself in the webcam. When I got into the test, there was like a little thing at the top, and one of the screens said recording. It was red, but it was all black. So I wasn't sure if my webcam was working or not. And so there's a little button at the top that says something like raise hand or something. And they'll tell you that a proctor has been contacted, and I had to wait a minute or so, and actually a chat window opened up where I was able to talk with the proctor there.
Okay. Did you ever hear the proctor's voice throughout the experience?
No.
Okay. And did you ever see the proctor's face?
Nope. It was just the chat window.
All right. And then just logistically, you found a room with good internet, a quiet room where you're not going to be disturbed. You had to show them the room. Were you able to have food or drink or anything?
Yes, you are able to have a glass of water so long as the glass itself is clear. Anything else, though, would be prohibited.
Okay. So just giving folks an overview of, what you need, the general setup, so that you're not surprised. So let's get into the test. And before you get into the details, at a high level, the GMAT at home is slightly different than the GMAT that you take in a test center because it doesn't have all the sections. So can you talk about that?
Correct. There is no writing section, so you don't have to worry about writing. But all the other 3 sections are still there, and they're full length. The quant section is still 31 questions, 62 minutes. Verbal section is still 36 questions long. IR is still 12 questions long. So there's no writing section. The other change is that you aren't allowed to pick the section order. It has to go quant, verbal, IR.
Okay, so quant, verbal, IR, but no writing section. So that, did you feel like that sort of impacted you positively in having one less section to do?
Oh yeah, possibly because you don't have to spend that mental load trying to write an essay at some point. But also, in the in the current, like in the in-person GMAT, you could always like shove the writing towards last too. So basically, it's just 30 less minutes you're in the room. So in case like internet cuts out or something like that, though, that gives you like a better window to take the test in.
Okay. And so I know folks are wondering about this. For the quant section, you're not allowed to have paper and pencil. You're not even allowed to have a physical whiteboard. The GRE, for those who are considering the GRE, does let you have a physical whiteboard. So you have to use an online whiteboard. Can you talk about what that experience was like and how you mentally prepared?
Yeah, so I did like some practice beforehand in math. I didn't do a lot of practice with the whiteboard and verbal because actually I thought the whiteboard would actually be an advantage because if I was to summarize like arguments or reading comprehension passages, I can touch type and just like write P1 and type a lot faster than I could write. So I actually thought the whiteboard actually saved me a bit of time in the verbal section. In math, though, obviously it's going to be annoying because you can't write equations or expressions like you're used to. So the one thing I did to prepare was just play around with Microsoft Paint, tried a couple different writing things, typed, and what I found worked best for me was typing. Just kind of like do like one step of the mental math, write it down, or if it was a word problem, type out the variables, assign them, or if it was a data sufficiency question, I would write what the point of the question was, like find X ? Which kept me on task. So typing out equations is a bit annoying in some places, especially when you're working with radicals. There's really no good substitute for that. And fractions as well can be kind of annoying to kind of like cross multiply. But overall, it was less annoying than I thought it'd be.
Okay. And it sounds like you did some experimentation to prepare, or maybe can you talk a bit about, trying it out? What can people download the whiteboard ahead of time? Do they have an opportunity to try it, or did you have to use like some third-party substitute to sort of get that experience?
Yeah, at this point, the whiteboard is not available to download. That may change depending on when you're watching this video, but I use Microsoft Paint. You can use any online whiteboard like webwhiteboard.com. Really, the things you're looking for is something you can type with, or something that allows you to write on a screen with your mouse. That should provide a close enough approximation of what the whiteboard on the GMAT will be like.
Okay, and I should also clarify for folks that I believe you're not allowed to use a tablet PC, so you're not actually going to be able to write on the screen.
Correct.
Yeah, so you do need to use your mouse to write, which I would say is probably challenging, but like Pete, you can type. And so can you share more about how you did? Did you get a score after you took the test?
I did not. Scores are going to appear they said about 7 days after you take the exam. You should get an email or should be in your GMAT account. So still waiting to hear it since I took it yesterday.
Okay, yeah, so that's a big difference. When you take it at Test Center, you see the score sort of immediately after, and here it's 7 days later. So other than the whiteboard and the fact that there's no writing section, is there anything else that maybe like would feel different to a student taking this at home versus in a test center?
Another thing, what we want to bring up is at home I have a fairly large monitor, and I don't think I was prepared for the text to stretch as much as it would, and the buttons were kind of small, so I did have to search for them at times. So keeping that in mind, it may be better just to do it on like a smaller monitor or your laptop monitor, because I found that kind of annoying at times. Another times I would like click next, and I was looking for the confirmation to move on to the next question, but the whiteboard was covering it up. So if you're wondering where it is, if your whiteboard's in the middle of the screen, you may want to move it. Oh, another thing I do want to mention about the whiteboard, you are able to resize it as big or small as you want.
Okay, I think those tips are really helpful. And I think one advantage that folks are going to have by taking it at home is you can actually practice in the room on the computer that you're going
Mhm.
to use when you're taking these mock tests. And I might even advise that you do it the same time of day that you're going to do the actual test. And so you get into a routine. And Pete's been a GMAT tutor and expert at Magoosh for a while. So what tips would you have for people preparing?
First, obviously, prepare with a whiteboard. Even if you think you're going to take the in-person GMAT in a month or two, we don't know how long test centers are going to be closed. So it would be a good idea to, just to work it into your routine, trying the whiteboard, seeing how you can use it to manipulate equations. That's one thing I would suggest. Another thing I would suggest is to make sure that this is going to sound weird, but make sure your mouse is, make sure the buttons on the mouse are, except for the left and right one, turned off. Because I used a USB mouse on the test that worked just fine, but there were a couple of side buttons on my mouse that are like forward or back with the browser, and I accidentally pressed one in the IR section and the whole screen went white, and I kind of panicked. So I thought about it and like, well, maybe I hit back. If I hit the other one to go forward, that might solve things, which it did. But you don't want to deal with that. I lost about a minute there. You don't want to deal with that during the test. So if you have a USB mouse, just check the button mappings beforehand. And aside from like the left and right click, just turn everything else off.
Okay. Those are all, I think, great tips. And I think there is an element that you just highlighted where there's some technological glitches that might come up that could throw you. And so just being mentally aware and prepared for those seems like a great idea. Are there any sort of closing thoughts that you have about, taking the GMAT at home and in comparison to maybe taking the GRE at home or waiting until test centers open again, which I know is uncertain?
Yeah, it was definitely an experience. I do think the whiteboard does have its advantages, but it does have that major disadvantage of not being able to write out equations the way you want them. If you were thinking about taking the online GMAT, I wouldn't schedule it just yet. I would play around with a whiteboard for a week or two in your practice, see how that feels, and if you feel like you can handle it, schedule one. Keep in mind that you can only take the online GMAT once at this point, and it's not going to count against your limit of 5 in a year or 8 in a lifetime. So other than that, yep, the online GMAT does have its advantages. I would like to say you can schedule one for pretty much any time you want. The flexibility, I think, of getting to take it in a place of your choosing can help with the test stress. Obviously, not being able to write out equations is a huge minus, but you'll just have to play around with a whiteboard for yourself, see if the advantages outweigh the disadvantages for you. And if they do, go ahead and take it online.
Well, that's great advice. And I'll also add that for folks who are applying to business school, maybe in round threes have been extended. Typically, the guidance is you may not want to apply in round 3 because most schools are full, but this year it's unclear if students will defer. So if you're applying in round 3 and you need to take a test, you can take the online GMAT. You can also take the online GRE, which does let you use a physical whiteboard or a laminated sheet of paper. So if that's more comfortable for you, if you try out the online whiteboard and you don't like it, you can always take the GRE. We will share information below this video on both more details on the online GMAT, details on the online GRE, so you all can sort of see what makes sense for you. Well, thanks for joining us, Pete, and sharing your experience with our students. I know they're going to love hearing about the nitty-gritty and the online whiteboard and the mouse and the monitor and the Wi-Fi, because that's all the stuff that's going to matter come test day. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.